Hi everyone. We had just finished up, or last left off, I was helping you construct surveys. So I'm going to pick up kind of in the same vein, but start in a different area and maybe explain why all of this is actually even important to you. I keep trying to bring it back to that. I know you're learning a lot of new stuff, and certainly surveys are really at the core of our life right now. A lot of people, their promotions, their performance reviews, they're based off of surveys. Everything in marketing is survey and data analysis. So what we're learning is some tough stuff, sure, but if you can understand how to construct a good survey, a reliable survey, and a valid survey, you have actually a very important skill. When I go into consulting, people will call me for their organization and say, we want to do an employee engagement survey. We want to know how engaged our employees are. Can you create a survey for us that measures that? I say, absolutely, I can do that for you. And I charge $350 an hour. And they say, okay. And off I go, and I create a survey for them and help them analyze their data about their employee engagement in their corporation. So again, one of the reasons I went quantitative, believe it or not, is because someone told me if you can do quant, you can do qual. But it doesn't work the other way around. If you can do qualitative research, doesn't mean you can do quantitative research. So those of you who are very interested not only in academic research, but using survey and data analysis tools, again, it's a route that not many people take. So if you can get through this quantitative information, you will have an edge on a lot of people who don't understand survey construction and data analysis. So, all right. At any rate, sorry, didn't mean to babble on. You're trying to put your survey together. Everything is here in this module is where we're working in. I'm going to extend the date here. I did put today's lecture from Zoom is up here as a recording from 10:05. But we're going to go back up and pick up with measurement, reliability, and validity today. So I did a lecture on measurement already, and we talked about these measurement levels. I hope they're becoming clearer. Mostly nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. These are our 4 levels. For your surveys, okay, you need at minimum, bare minimum, three interval level variables. Remember, an interval level variable is multiple questions measured by a scale, a Likert scale. Nominal and ordinal are mostly going to always be in your demographic section, and they usually are asking for just an order or a category. It's not that we can't have nominal and ordinal, and you can have as many nominal and ordinal variables as you want in your survey, but you need at least 3 interval level variables with at least 5 to 10 questions each, minimum. I would say you could even have up to 6 interval level variables with 10 questions each, and you're still doing okay. We don't probably want to get beyond 6 just because we don't want our survey to get so long that people don't want to fill it out, or they start half of it but don't finish the other half, and that can mess with our data collection, obviously. But hopefully you're starting to see, knowing the level of the data and how you're going to measure that concept or that issue or that variable is critical. So this, I hope, is sinking in a little more. We talked about types of scales, the Likert scale, semantic differential, and we even talked a little bit about how we start when we want to measure something, the germinal idea. But I really want to focus on conceptualization and operas. I hate this word, and what I've learned is if I look at it, I reverse it due to my dyslexia. But if I just don't look at the word while I'm trying to say it, operationalize, I can say it. If you have dyslexia, maybe you understand what I'm talking about. But we are really going to look at that word operationalize, because this gives us the detailed description of what we're trying to measure. And a lot of times people say, well, I want to measure someone's attitude. Attitude and motivation have given researchers trouble over the years because it's so broad. We haven't really been able to define it as well as we can. It's just like saying, I want to know what makes people happy. And I say, define happiness. Oh my gosh, there's monetary happiness, emotional happiness, physical happiness. Do you see where I'm going? We have to conceptualize what it is we want to measure and get very detailed and operationalize exactly what it is we're measuring, or we're not going to get good results. We're not going to get what we call valid and reliable results if we don't pinpoint exactly what we're measuring. And that's why these scales, guys, have so many subscales. Because you think about it, empathy. Well, what kind of empathy? Empathy is a broad term and means a lot of different things. So no wonder there are 6 subscales pinpointing a more accurate types of empathy, like suffering or sympathy. That's why we have one measure with multiple factors, because we have to get very specific about what it is we're measuring. So when I, look at surveys or hear surveys in the news, which you hear a lot of that. A lot of our news is surveys and studies or what people think. I really want to know about that measure. I want to know what they ask. Well, how did they operationalize it? One of my favorite surveys, I don't know why, I just thought it was interesting that they did, was women and how long they would give up sex for clothing. Survey, give up sex for clothing. And I thought this was a fabulous, fun study. And I used this, I think, in Interpersonal and some others. It's from 2011, so it's a little old. But 1/3 of Americans are more than willing to give up sex than their mobile phones. Oh, this was not even the clothing one. They're willing to give up their mobile phone? Give up sex for a week rather than their mobile phone. Oh my God, fascinating. Okay, I'm not going to answer how I would, what is this one? Oh, it's all I'm getting is this one now. What happened to clothing? I might not have spelled it right. All right, I don't want to get too far off track from this, but the interesting thing, now here's another one. 50% of people would give up sex for more closet space. Okay. Now, I want to know a few things. Who did they sample? What kind of living situation are they in? What did they mean? I got all kinds of questions here about this study. And define sex. I mean, even Bill Clinton had a hard time defining that. All right, you get the idea. We have to be very specific. And that's why you're seeing all these subscales, because what we're trying to do is operationalize what we're measuring so that we can be sure it has reliability and validity. And this is what I want to talk about today. Why we're using the measures we're using and not making up our own is essentially this issue of reliability and validity. So I'm going to walk you through this. Reliability, first of all, is the accuracy that a measure has in producing stable, consistent measurements. It's reliable. Every single time I use this measure, I know it's going to be consistent in its product. That's what we want. We have a couple ways to find out if a measure is reliable or consistent and stable. One way is a test-retest reliability. So maybe we give you a test at the beginning of an experiment and get your information or attitudes or opinions. Then you undergo some treatment and we retest you to see if it's still producing the same results or if it's different or changed because of the treatment. When we get into experimental design and research, we'll talk a lot more about test-retest reliability. But it's basically a check. We give the test twice to the same person to make sure that it's producing reliable, stable results. The other way, and the more common one, is we simply calculate a Chromebox alpha, the reliability test. This is a statistical test, and it's very easily done in SPSS, which I have already basically showed you. I'm going to jump over to our textbook, boom, right here. This is the section, chapter 8, and reliability. And you already know, but here's the interpreting reliability scale. You've heard me talk about Chromebox Alpha. We even talked about it in COMM420. So a 0.90 plus, that's excellent. Yay us. 0.8 to 0.9 is good, and 0.70 to 0.8 respectable. Okay, again, below that you see minimally acceptable, and I've had research published with a 0.68, but it's minimally acceptable. It's saying your scale isn't actually producing reliable results each time. So how can you make conclusions about what a population thinks if you don't even have a reliable scale? So again, we do this with SPSS, and your book actually walks you through it in SPSS. Remember, I showed you this, and they actually tell you how to do it. This is going to be very useful because y'all are going to get a free SPSS account next. That's coming, foreshadowing. And you're actually going to be able to calculate your survey's reliability coefficients. You will be putting this data into SPSS and running that statistic. You'll get to run your own Chromebox Alpha and find out if your measure is reliable. And of course, once you put that all into the computer, it spits it out, and this scale had a 0.909. We are good to go. Again, fantastic reliability. So that's the reliability side of a measure. It is reliable, but is it valid? And validity is an interesting concept. Validity is hard for students to grasp, but it's the degree to which the instrument measures what it is intended to measure. Go with me here. Again, my one validity issue that I've had doing research was I could not find a valid way to measure the concept of neutrality. In communication, you can respond very neutral to people. And we say that's a very defensive form of communication. And I could not, the questions, I kept wording them and trying to get it to measure neutrality. And it was all over the place. I didn't know how to measure this concept. And neutrality is the idea of, you tell me that your grandparent just died. And I say, well, there's work to be done, so let's get with it. I don't offer any empathy. Neutrality is the opposite of that. And how do you find out if someone is a neutral communicator? It was very difficult to construct these questions. So I had a hard time trying to operationalize and get questions that measured neutrality. I think I'm jumping back to the textbook real quick because I like this diagram here of reliability and validity. They can be confusing, okay? But they give you this archery example, and I like this. I'm measuring neutrality, and every time I have a different person take my survey, I'm getting consistent results. That's reliable and valid. That's always what we want. However, over here, I've got a really reliable instrument, but it is not measuring neutrality. It's measuring something else. And I kind of like that. So the archer shoots 4 arrows. They all clump together on the outside ring. I was reliable. I was consistent. I shot here every single time, but I did not actually get what I wanted. I wasn't measuring the right concept. And then you have, this was me with neutrality. I could not get it to be reliable or valid. Every time I shot the arrow, it went it probably just hit the garage wall and didn't even hit the target. That's how bad I had a time trying to get my validity and reliability for neutrality in line. So hopefully that analogy can help. Is it consistent in what it is measuring every time? And are you actually measuring the concept you say you're measuring? Reliability, validity. So there are all these different kinds of validity out there. And I don't get into these in 350 because honestly, I think it's too confusing unless you take the higher quant class. So let's look at just a few of these definitions. And I don't necessarily want you to get too caught up in this. I'm going to give you some simpler definitions over here. We have face validity. And face validity, it really just is just that. When you look at the measure, does it seem to be asking about the concept you're measuring? Does it? And this was interesting with neutrality, because neutrality is a funny word. I wouldn't, do you react neutral when your friends or family tell you devastating stories? That's just an odd way of putting it. So on face, you could just look at the questions and say, I'm not even sure what this is measuring. So this would be like, let's go into, one of our measures and just pull up a random measure without the title or anything on it. Could you make a guess at what it's trying to measure? Just on face value of reading the questions on any random survey, could you make a guess at what it's attempting to measure? That's face validity. Does it have face validity? Meaning I can look at just the questions and probably already tell you what this is trying to measure. That comes from experience, again, of looking at surveys, and particularly in my field. I can tell you just on face looking at the questions. Criterion validity, however, it looks at how accurately a new measure can predict or validate a concept. So what is the criterion for measuring neutrality? To what degree can we get an exact prediction of it? And this runs into the predictive validity. It's a subset of the criterion validity you see here. Can I then, if I've got a criterion that's predictable, can I then infer future scores? So let's take the Myers-Briggs. It's a very interesting example. Does the Myers-Briggs have criterion validity? A lot of people would say no. But if the scores were predictive every single time, and some of you have taken, I think it has some criterion validity. I've taken it and I always seem to be an introvert. So then, if I took some other test that said, do I like the aloneness? Let's call it the aloneness test. Could you predict my score on the aloneness test if you knew my Myers-Briggs score? That's predictive validity. And I would say you probably could. Do I have a lot of trouble being alone? I'm an introvert, criterion. Every single time I take the freaking Myers-Briggs, I come out as an introvert. So if I go and take this test, ability to be alone, based on that, could you predict maybe my score? I would say you can. I don't have a problem being alone. I don't have a problem eating alone. I don't have a problem going to the movies alone. Don't have a problem sleeping alone. Yeah. I could do okay on a deserted island, provided they had Italian food and lots of wine. So maybe I should just move to Italy. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. All right, so can I predict your scores on other similar measures? Then we have concurrent validity. And this is predictive validity examines and measures concurrent validity. A researcher obtains the score for the new measure and the score for the criterion measure at the same point and looks at how strongly the two correlate. So concurrent, let's go back to my example. It's still working. I got my Myers-Briggs introvert score and my willingness to be alone score. Do those two actually correlate? Not only can I predict it, but are they similar enough that there's a strong correlation? And there wouldn't be. Here's why. There wouldn't be a strong correlation. You're saying, what? I was just with you till you said that. I don't think there'd be good concurrent validity because there's different types of introverts. Not all introverts enjoy being alone. They need some alone time, but they don't enjoy being completely alone. So I think this would not be a good, that they would not correlate. That my introversion score on the Myers-Briggs and my willingness to be alone score would not correlate with one another, or it would be a very low correlation. We haven't talked about correlation yet, but that's we'll get there. And the reason I think that, again, is because being alone is only one part of introversion. So see where things start to go off a little bit in that operationalization? Being alone is not the only thing associated with introversion. There's other kinds of things we can tease out and measure about introversion. And then we have retrospective validity. When you've previously measured the criterion and you attempt to develop a measure at a later point. And I have now measured defensive and supportive communication several different times, and I've used my experience now retrospectively to help me develop a better measure. And that's what that is looking at. So that is validity. I'm going to come back to, construct and factorial validity are also listed here. And is this relying on theory, and how much does it support that? I don't want to get into construct or factorial right at this minute. What I do want to present to you are your threats to validity. And the reason I'm interested in this is because I asked you about this in your proposal, and I said, don't worry about it because, we didn't really get to talk to it. So, confounding constructs. I love confounding constructs, but they're difficult to explain. Okay. Confounding constructs are other things that could be making that person answer in the way they're answering. It's a third mysterious thing out here, or fourth. Basically, we say, I'll give you an example. I'll use my smoking causes cancer. Is that true? I say no, because there's other things that also cause cancer. Those are confounding constructs. Other things out there that could be contributing to that result that are not accounted for by the survey and the questions itself. So I had to take this affection survey, and it was asking me, are you affectionate with your family, blah, 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 and your significant other. And I immediately wrote the dissertation student, because he was a former grad student of mine. I said, this survey was very difficult for me to take because I have a confounding construct when it comes to family. I am not affectionate with my family, don't want to be affectionate with my family. With my significant other, maybe a totally different story. So I'm messing with his validity, because when it comes to affection, nothing is going to make me answer positively towards my family. Nothing. Now, significant others or my son or people like that, different answer. But there's no way he could account for what had happened to me in my childhood or whatnot to get a valid result from me taking the survey. So I messed his validity up because he can't account for my personal experiences with my family. So it's going to skew the answers, where most people would consider affection from family and a significant other both welcome. Do you see what I'm trying to get at? There was something else that he couldn't account for. That's going to mess his survey up. A lot of people fake responses. They actually just get bored and they'll just circle all agree. And that messes with someone's validity because you got reverse score questions in there. And so you can imagine, you don't put the R's, the little reverse score notations, on your survey when someone's taking it. You leave those off. And so if they just say, I'm just going to circle all fives, and half of those questions are asking the opposite, your survey's, I was about to say a bad word, it's messed up, folks. Or if you're just faking answers, I love this. Anyone ever have to take an employment test where you have to admit if you would steal something from the company or not? You better fake that response, actually, if you want the job. Or you just want to look good to whoever is interpreting this data, so you lie. I have this problem at the doctor all the time. I should not admit this. They always ask at my doctor your consumption of alcohol. And when I'm filling out these dumb surveys on alcohol, it's like, well, I might sound like an alcoholic, so I fake that crap. Totally. No, I don't have a glass of wine every day. Hell no, I would never do that. It's just like, do you fake how many days a week you exercise on those doctor's forms? Okay. Ruins your validity. Ruins it. All right, faking, acquiescing is actually another kind. I was just talking about that, where you basically want to give the appropriate answers or what you think the researcher wants. So it was also difficult for me to take my friend's affection survey. He's studying with a top communication and affection scholar, and I knew what he was trying to get at. And there's also a little bit in me who's like, I'm going to say the opposite just to mess with his data. No, you don't ever do that to a quantitative statistician. Don't be doing that. That's serious. So, but acquiesce. Again, social desirability, same kind of thing. The screw you effect, which is what I just mentioned. Maybe I don't like this person, or they've made a bad survey, or I didn't get good service, so I'm not going to answer the survey fairly because I just want to screw them. That's like, someone saying, no, you're leaving a 25-cent tip so they know. Or maybe you walk out and bail on the bill totally. And sometimes you just have bad measurement items or bad questions. So take a look at this area here as well. I hope I've given you a little explanation of why we are being so particular with the subscales, with the survey. And it's this right here. It's so hard to know if we're getting completely reliable and valid data from the construction of the survey itself to then having to worry about how are people going to answer it. Can we predict future surveys and instruments from this? Can we correlate this to other surveys? And if we can, then are we measuring the same concept and our survey isn't unique? We have all these issues going on as researchers that we have to worry about when we measure something. And that is this concept of reliability and validity. You are still working this week on putting your scales together. We are still in measurement, that reliability and validity, which is chapter 8, until Monday the 12th. We are going to have time to come back and talk about and go over this one more time, which I will do. But hopefully some of this will start sinking in. And that's going to be it for the measurement and reliability chapter. Then later next week, we'll move into sampling. All right? All right, guys. There it is. Reliability, validity, blah, 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 and some pretty corny stories. Have a good one.